Thank you. Good morning. Hi, Candace, by the way. Yeah, today we wanted to go over the 2020 Security Operations Annual Report from Arctic Wolf. Also wanted to talk about who we are, who Arctic Wolf is, the key findings from the annual report, and then with a small group like this, we will have, I think, plenty of time if there are any specific questions that that come about. And so if there, you can also throw some things in the chat if I'm going too fast, too slow, too technical, not technical enough, you know, just definitely give me any feedback that you would like. So I'm with Expedient Technology Solutions. We are a managed services provider that has been around for just over 17 years. Our mission is to reshape the experience that businesses and our team members have with IT and IT providers. So we're out here trying to just provide a different level of service, different level of expertise that the small to medium-sized businesses would get with IT. We also provide cybersecurity services and compliance services where we help clients that might have compliance, whether it be PCI, HIPAA, CMMC, or anything like that. We do have cloud hosting and managed backup solutions as well for our customers. I'm the CEO of Expedient, started it 17 years, like I said, 17 years ago. I am certified as a CISSP, certified in healthcare. We are working towards having our entire team certified as certified cybersecurity analysts as well. We have partnered with a company called Arctic Wolf. Their mission is to end cyber risk. Arctic Wolf is a third-party organization that provides managed detection and response, managed risk, and managed cloud monitoring services. So really what it is it's an expertise unto itself. And we decided that rather than trying to do it in-house, we would partner with somebody that just deals nothing but managed detection and response and things like that. So they're an organization that based out of Minnesota and have clients all over the world. So Arctic Wolf has a lot of data that they gather over the course of the year because they work with a lot of different clients in a lot of different industries. They have a lot of visibility into things that are happening on networks, things that are happening on the internet. And so they decided to put together this annual security operations report based upon what they were seeing. And so what we want to do is go through all of these different key findings that they had, because those are the things that most small businesses, medium-sized businesses are seeing from a cybersecurity perspective. So the first one is alert fatigue. So to give you an example of what alert fatigue would be is that there's a lot of things that you don't see going on the network, hitting your firewalls, hitting your Office 365 accounts. There's just a lot of different actions happening constantly that you just don't have a lot of visibility into unless you have some really advanced tools. So once you install these tools, then you start to get all of these alerts, and you have to know what to do with these alerts. And so again, another reason that we've partnered with somebody is they have the tools and the expertise in order to make sense of that. So right here on this slide, you'll see the 50.1 million observations. So this is our network last week. So we're a company of about 40 people, just under 40 people. We have lots of servers, we have Office 365, we have all those type of things. And so what they're getting is they're getting 50 million data points that are happening from our network in just a single week. So obviously you're not going to find a lot of IT people that can digest that kind of information in the course of a week. And so the question is, what do you do with it? So Arctic Wolf has an artificial intelligence platform that will take all those data points and look for threats. And what they do is they take whatever needs to be looked at with a human set of eyes, and they will investigate that and then they will bring those down to four ticketed incidents that we need to look at on just our network alone. And so alert fatigue is definitely an issue for IT people and cybersecurity professionals, and that number has just increased with COVID, working remote. There's just a large number of incidents to take a look at. The second key finding is that 35% of the attacks that are happening to small to medium-sized businesses are happening after hours. So you're finding that it's great that you have your IT people there from 8 to 5 days a week, but that's not when all of the bad actors are actually trying to get into your network. And so what they wanted to let you know is that you need to be paying attention 24/7 at this point. And in our experience, we've had a couple organizations in this area that have actually experienced ransomware events. They weren't our managed type customers, but they were customers that we do business with, and they actually had ransomware events that came in on Sunday morning. So by the time, unfortunately, those weren't clients that we were doing a lot of monitoring with. So you get a call on a Monday morning saying, "Hey, my network's locked up," and so you have to respond to that. But had you had some sort of like the managed detection and response service in there, you would have been able to detect that and shut that down before it would have spread across their network. So you definitely want to be paying attention to your network all the hours of the day. Another key finding that they had was unsecured Wi-Fi networks. So with COVID pushing the workforce primarily remote, that a lot of people were connecting to a lot more external wireless networks. And so with that, there was an increased risk of attacks on those machines. So in the cybersecurity world with wireless networks, people can actually stand up. If you go to a Panera Bread, any type of open Wi-Fi network, people can stand up a device that would clone that wireless network, and then they would be able to jump onto your machine using vulnerabilities that exist and or capture web traffic like usernames and passwords and things like that. And so, the disbursement of the workforce opens up more opportunity for that type of an attack to happen. So the question is okay, what can you do as a result of this? And there's a couple answers to that. One is try to avoid connecting to wireless networks that you don't know. So just avoid that altogether. And if you need to connect to a wireless network, you could use a hotspot on your cell phone. They have dedicated hotspots, obviously. But another option would be to encrypt all of your traffic using a VPN back to your corporate network, and just make sure that all traffic, while connected outside of the office, would be a VPN connection that would protect that information as you're going to your applications. You can also throw endpoint monitoring software such as the managed detection response agent from Arctic Wolf, or some other type of organization has endpoint detection and response that would notice any malicious activities happening on your laptop while you're off the network. I'm not sure if there's any questions thus far, but.
I don't have any at the moment.
Okay. The next section is a patchwork approach to patching. So they had noticed that it was taking IT departments an additional 40 days to deploy patches for critical vulnerabilities because of the change in work over the last year. So, and they're also, it's kind of a constant that high volumes of vulnerabilities are being discovered, and then those are also being taken advantage of through exploits. And so what they're seeing is that delay in patching is increasing your risk, because those vulnerabilities remain exposed for extended periods of time, potentially behind less business grade type of security appliances when you're connecting from your home or connecting remotely from a different location. And so that just exposes your computers and your networks to additional risk during that time. And so the question is, what can you do about this? And really, it's making sure that you have systems in place to one, scan for those vulnerabilities. So a lot of small businesses will utilize tools that will patch your Microsoft applications. So your Microsoft Windows servers, your Windows workstations, Microsoft Office, those type of things. That's usually kind of a basic Windows update type functionality. The issue is that these vulnerabilities are exposed in any number of softwares above and beyond Microsoft. So in this slide, you have a picture of just this week's listing of a handful. You're looking at A through D on the list of vulnerabilities that were released this week. And you have Adobe, Acrobat, very large number of vulnerabilities exist in that on an ongoing basis. You have things with Dell. You have things, a lot of times you have your third-party web browsers like Google Chrome, Firefox, Opera, those type of things. Those usually need an update to happen. And so a lot of your small business tools will typically not include scanning for vulnerabilities above and beyond Microsoft. And so you need to have a tool that will show you where your exposure exists. And as you're going through and looking at vulnerabilities, you have to remember there's kind of two perspectives to look at from a vulnerability management perspective. The first one is from the outside in. And so if I'm sitting outside of your network as an attacker, I'm going to scan against what's open coming into your network and look for vulnerabilities before. So the vulnerability is what I use to either craft an exploit or use a already known tool out there to exploit that vulnerability and gain access to your network. The second perspective is, unfortunately, we kind of have to look at this now. It's insider risk. So it could be malicious intent or even just accidental, where somebody internally does something wrong or is looking to capture data or do something harmful to your network from the inside. And so you don't want to just assume that all attacks or all vulnerabilities are going to come from the outside. You need to be scanning the internal network as well. A couple ways to solve that problem. One would be, tying back into Arctic Wolf, they have their managed risk product, which puts a scanner on your internal network and scans continuously for vulnerabilities across multiple systems. There's also agents that go on your computers to scan deeper. And then they also utilize a web-based tool to scan from the outside and give you that visibility. There are other products on the market. Some of them cost more than others, but you have Tenable is an organization that that has Tenable.io, which is a web-based scanning tool. They have Nessus Pro, which is a laptop-based scanning tool. And then I know there's some open source ones as well that may not go as deep as, but you want to try to do what you can to stop those vulnerabilities from coming in. The next one is phishing with ransomware. So a 64% increase in Q2 over Q1 of phishing attempts. And then obviously the most pronounced were the baking industry, where they saw a 520% increase in phishing attempts between March and June. So what the issue is here is that when you're outside of your normal work environment, that they're banking on you not maybe paying attention as closely as possible, as if you were at your desk. So if you're at home and you're opening an email, you might not be thinking, because of the context, you might not be thinking, of where that email came from, who it came from, what you're actually clicking on, and that's where that just opens the door from ransomware. So a couple of the actual ransomware events that we helped to recover from this year actually came in via email. And so it's just a matter of somebody clicking on the wrong thing. Hopefully you have your computers configured where your users aren't running as an administrator on the machine. If they need administrator rights, you might create a secondary account that they're prompted to enter that password, because if they have local administrator rights, they click on the wrong link and you have the strong potential for that machine to be compromised. And then they use that machine to explore your network, infect other things, deploy their ransomware. Other things that you can do is really you want to train your users. So there are multiple options out there on the market for security awareness training, and then also phish testing. So we utilize a company, not trying to sell any specific product, but we use KnowBe4. They've got a pretty big catalog of training, which is what we really like about it. But they have a tool where we can actually send phish emails as a test to the users, and you could get a feel for who's more click prone, is how they put it. You could see, they open the email. If you had an attachment, that they click on the attachment. If you had a link, you can link to a website. You can make that website look however you want it to look. So a lot of times if the client uses Office 365, we'll prompt for Office 365 username and password. You will get users to enter their username and password at that point. And that is obviously a big deal, because once the attackers would capture that username and password, then they can log in primarily to Office 365. But if your VPN is exposed, they could potentially use that if it's tied into your Active Directory. And so it's just it's definitely a strong area where you need to be focused on training more than anything. And then also, if they have any questions, I swear I delete more messages than I probably should, right? So I probably get a lot of legitimate messages that just look a little off. And so if I'm not expecting it, more than likely I'm just going to delete it. But there are also some tools in Office 365, if you use that, to report that back to Microsoft. And that way it's constantly improving their tool set. Another area to really pay attention to on that would be multi-factor authentication. And so if you're not familiar with what multi-factor authentication is it just adds another layer to the login process above and beyond your username and password. Typically, it's going to be, you experience it somewhere. I know any banking site that I hit anymore, they're going to send me a 6-digit code via text. That's another factor, because it's assuming that I have the phone that is, tied to the account. And so that's technically not the most secure form of multi-factor authentication, because you could clone phones now, but it's better than nothing at that point. But there are other tools out there such as Duo, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. There are different tools out there depending on your environment to incorporate multi-factor authentication, which would prevent what the next section is, which is account takeover. So hopefully everybody has at least heard the term the dark web. And so the dark web is a section of the internet out there where usually malicious activities happening, but there's a lot of usernames and passwords that float around out there on the dark web. And so we utilize at our office, we have some dark web scanning that we do for us and for our customers. And so from time to time, we'll get an alert that says, this email address and this potentially, if it has it, it will show a password, has been compromised out there on the internet. And so when that happens, unfortunately, you have a lot of people that reuse passwords out there on the internet. So they may use the same password that they use to log into their computer at work. They may use that on a website such as LinkedIn or some other location that is also tied to their corporate email address. And so when that ties together and it's a similar password or the same password as your network, then those attackers can utilize those credentials to try to log into Office 365, log into the network VPN, whatever is open there. And so you definitely want to be scanning for that information and taking advantage of, if you do happen to get a password, pass that along to a user, make sure that those users are changing that password anywhere that they feel like they may have reused that password. And then also, again, you want to get into the multi-factor authentication as much as possible. You want to make sure that you're deleting expired user accounts. And then, lastly, just make sure that you're, again, training your users to, on best password practices. Strong passwords, don't reuse them. Maybe utilize a password manager. I use one that I've used for a long time, but there's a bunch of them out there. I use one called RoboForm, and that it goes on all of my devices and syncs my passwords across all of those devices. So if I'm using a password now and I'm creating a new account on some web page that's tied to my corporate email address, it'll generate like a 20-character just random password and automatically save it. I have no idea what that password is. I have a master password for all of my passwords that unlocks that. And so when I go back to that website, I just click fill password and it automatically enters that for me. But a couple things to pay attention to when it comes to account takeover as well is what we're seeing in the wild, so to speak, is that we're seeing a lot of people who get compromised. Those hackers will then take that, use it to log into some sort of email like Office 365 or Google, and then they're looking to insert themselves into some sort of transaction, such as a bank transfer, an invoice payment, any of those type of things. They're trying to get into those in order to get the money to go to them instead of going to where it's supposed to. And the issue, what's happening is once your account's taken over, they might use your email address to send and receive messages to your customers, and you don't see it's happening because they're pretty sophisticated now. They create rules that just completely hides that transmission of that specific subject. For example, it never makes it back to your inbox, and they're removing things from the sent items. So they're creating rules. That's an indicator of compromise. A rule that you don't recognize in Office 365 would be an indicator that something malicious might be happening. So that's something to take a look at. But we've actually had customers receive emails that were not legitimate. So going back a slide to the phishing and the ransomware, they were receiving messages that were ransomware or phishing type messages from people they normally do business with, because that person was infected and that person was compromised. And so even if you know the person and you know the business and you trust who you're doing business with, it's very possible that that person had been compromised. So if you get a message from somebody that you still have to look at that with scrutiny, if that makes sense. I had another example this last year where I got a message from somebody that I knew, but they changed the phone number in the signature line. Everything was the same except for they changed the phone number. So when you pick up the phone to call them back, it didn't go back to that customer or that vendor. It went back to somebody else. And so you have to be very careful. You can't just reply back to that message and say, is this legitimate? Because they've already got that email conversation hidden behind the scenes from the user, more than likely. So you just have to be very, very, cautious. I hate to say skeptical as much as possible anymore, but it's just kind of the world we live in. And then especially if your role has anything to do with finance, put checks and balances that are outside of electronic in order to, if somebody wants to change payment details, they want you to, use a different credit card to return onto, any of those type of things. You just really need to be more scrutinizing of those type of transactions to avoid the fraud, because a lot of times once it gets hit and once it leaves your bank account, it's gone forever. It's very hard to get back. So those are the key points that came from the report. If there are any questions or you want to go deeper, I know in the registration, there was a link to our website that would allow you to actually get a copy of the report. So I didn't want to go super technical and super detailed on it because it's about a 25, 30 page report. And wasn't quite sure if it was going to be what audience might be attending today, whether it was going to be technical or not technical. So I wanted to keep it very high level, but I know with a small group like this, we still have some time. I just want to make sure that we can open it up and see if anybody has any questions on this, or again, we're a small business IT consultant. If you've got questions while we're on the line today, I'd be glad to point you in the right direction.
Hi, Marcus. My name's Pat Ryan. I'm with MetroNet. I'm obviously an ISP, and very interested in seeing our customers protect their data systems. Do you guys, do you recommend both hardware or software protection, or how do you determine what a customer gets?
So there's a couple ways to go about it. I take a very risk-based approach versus a kind of a scare-based approach when it comes to this. There's the reality. There's certain things that you just have to do because it's best practice. You wouldn't leave your door open at home at night and expect you to be to be secure. And so there's some basics with you want to have good password policy. You want to have all that type of stuff. But I would recommend that people take a look at what their exposure is, and then implement different controls to protect what those risks are. But I had a conversation with a client yesterday that we don't fully manage, and but they were wanting to talk about cybersecurity, and I said it's a layered approach. So they said, well, we got a virus over here. Why didn't our antivirus catch it? Well, it came via email, so you've got to put protections on your email. You've got to have good spam filters. You got to have Microsoft 365 now has something used to be called Advanced Threat Protection. Now it's called, I think, Windows Defender or Microsoft Defender 365, something like that. It will actually open files in the cloud and see if they're malicious before they even deliver it to your inbox. So it's going to cut down on malicious attachments. It cuts down on malicious links because it rewrites those links and it tests those links before you're allowed to go to those websites. So, that's just an example. Don't rely on antivirus on your computer. You've got to put for email protection, you've got to put 3 or 4 different combinations of tools in place in order just to protect that. So, Arctic Wolf is a good example. Even if you've got an existing managed services provider, their visibility with the tools that are typically managed service provider specific aren't going to be cybersecurity related necessarily, because it's just a different level. And again, our network last week, 50 million data points to take a look at. It's just a higher volume of things to pay attention to. So you got to have some specialized tools to be able to watch for those things that are happening. Arctic Wolf, their managed detection and response platform, we actually get a device that sits between our firewall and our network. So everything that comes in and leaves our network is actually being scanned at a different level than what just even the firewall's doing. And so I know that's a long answer to your question, but I would not recommend that everybody buy Arctic Wolf. I mean, if what you're doing, if you have a higher risk tolerance for what you're doing and there's not a return on the investment for that, then maybe that's not something to invest in. But I would definitely not just knee jerk and put in all of the stuff because some expert said to put it in. I would really talk to somebody who knows what they're doing and wants to kind of come alongside and make recommendations based upon specific business cases for that client.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question that's in the chat. Any recommendations for protecting social media accounts?
So, I think that's where I laugh, because I don't know if you remember a little while ago that Jack from Twitter actually had his account compromised, and you would think the CEO of Twitter would actually be protected. But if you look at what that was, is they had he had multi-factor authentication turned on, so you would get that code via text in order to log in. So I would definitely protect it by putting in whatever security measures they allow. Primarily, that's going to be some sort of multi-factor authentication. Jack would just be a little bit larger target than the average person. And so what somebody did is they actually, I think, went through AT&T or some other provider and were able to get a SIM card for his phone number. And so when that multi-factor authentication code came, it also came to the attacker's phone, and they were able to capture that and log in as him. So you want kind of as many layers as they give you, and just hope that, you know, there's a little bit of hope that maybe you're not that big of a target. I don't ever want to be at that level that I'm that big of a target, I suppose, that somebody would want to clone my phone and take it to that level. But yeah, I would definitely recommend protecting social media accounts with as much as you can, especially if it's the business too. You know, it's reputation risk at that point. What other questions?
Does that answer your question, April?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure.
Any other questions that I might answer? And I'd love feedback. I don't do this very often. I do a lot of one-on-one conversations with people. And so I try my best not to be too technical with it, and but also kind of demonstrate what risks are out there. All the ones that we cover today are really the ones that we're seeing as well, where people are getting compromised. Getting their accounts taken over is probably the biggest thing that we see. The customers that we have with Arctic Wolf, you will see we get a ticket alert pretty instantaneously. It's like, this user logged in to Office 365 from Nigeria. And it's pretty safe assumption that they're not vacationing in Nigeria at that point. So you kind of go into incident response mode, reset their password, kick all their Office 365 connections off, and then kind of put them, you know, back into normal place. But you know, those are the things that we see quite often. Thankfully, we don't see a lot of ransomware, but you hear a lot of ransomware events happening around. And you know, we're aware of businesses that really have lost a lot of productivity, a lot of data, because at the end of the day, it's kind of a gray area now to actually pay the ransom, because you're technically supporting probably you know, a country that might be on a designated terror list or something like that at the end of the day, if you're paying those ransoms. And so it's kind of, you want to have, you know, another thing that wasn't touched on here, but you want to have a really, really good backup system, because if you can't recover those backups, that's your fallback if ransomware would get through. And we didn't even touch on the whole news story that happened with a company called SolarWinds. And there was a very, very sophisticated attack that took actually well over a year to get that put in place, where they wrote malicious software code into a legitimate network monitoring tool that was used at, you know, by many, many government agencies, not to mention corporate companies. And it was a legitimate software update that came through, and it was sophisticated enough and patient enough to wait 2 weeks after the update even happened to start kind of phoning home, so to speak, back to the hackers. And so lots of data got stolen. I think they were in our nuclear agency's computer system, a lot of things like that. So, you know, and I'm sure those type of things can ultimately be tracked back to just basic cybersecurity type practices.
Yeah, I think that was on 60 Minutes just the other day.
Yeah, somebody said that. I'll have to go back and see if I can watch it.
Scary.
I think they said they found it because on the multi-factor authentication, I think somebody mentioned that it went to 2 different phones, and the code was set up to go to 2 different phones, and the engineer said, I only have 1 phone, so what's that other one? And that's where they kind of started to track back from there. So that's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you feel super confident that you have as much control as you think you have when you're doing some of this stuff. Because those are like I said, quote unquote experts that are supposed to be protecting all of that.